Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashta Prayeshva Patreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhakti Naishtaki. Okay, so we're on Canto 7, Chapter 9, Prayers by Prahlad Maharaj. So the context is that there's a very saintly young boy. He's only 5. When he was in the womb, actually, he heard profound spiritual instructions being spoken to his mother. He was so purified by that he was born incredibly oriented toward the divine. And his father is the exact opposite. He's a terrible person and extremely powerful, and lived his life in an extremely egotistical and driven way. But despite that, this boy, whose name is Prahlad, refused to shift in his orientation internally. And he's just witnessed that Krishna has manifested in that form, Nrsimha, that you saw, the protector. And the pastime is that he actually killed his father and liberated him, gave him a spiritual body by killing him in front of his eyes. And the Lord is so angry at this point because he's in such a protective mood, trying to protect his young, innocent devotee, that all the gathered devotees, including demigods, higher living beings, are like, wow, hold on, this is like even scary. So they're ushering Prahlad, saying, you go forward and offer him prayers, he's here to protect you. Please satisfy him with your bhakti, your devotion. And this whole chapter is really just a series of prayers. So you're jumping in the middle, and that's okay because it'll work, but that's the context. This is verse 21. 7, 9, 21. No, 22.
Yeah.
7, 9, 22. Satvang nitya vijitatma gunasvatamna kalo vashikrita vasurja visarga shaktihi chakre vasrishtamajyeshvara shodashare nishpiryaman upakarshvipopapannam. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
My dear Lord, O Supreme Great, you have created this material world of 16 constituents. But you are transcendental to the material qualities. In other words, these material qualities are under your full control, and you are never conquered by them. Therefore, the time element is your representation. My Lord, O Supreme, no one can conquer you. As for me, however, I am being crushed by the wheel of time, and therefore I surrender fully unto you. Now kindly take me under the protection of your lotus feet. Purport. The wheel of material miseries is also a creation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he is not under the control of the material energy. Rather, he is the controller of the material energy, whereas we, the living entities, are under its control. When we give up our constitutional position, Jiva Swarupahaya Krishnana Nitidasa, that's Bengali. It's from a verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which means the essential nature of the living entity is to be a servant of the Supreme. When we give up our constitutional position, the Supreme Personality of Godhead creates this material energy and her influence over the conditioned soul. Therefore, he is the Supreme, and only he can deliver the conditioned soul from the onslaught of material nature. Mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. That's from Bhagavad Gita 7:19. No, 14.
And it means?
It means basically what Prabhupada just said. Only he can deliver the conditioned soul from the onslaught. For one who surrenders, one who submits himself, tries to turn towards the Supreme. Maya, the external energy, continuously imposes upon the conditioned souls the suffering of the threefold miseries of this material world. Therefore, in the previous verse, Prahlad Maharaj prayed to the Lord, but for your lordship, no one can save me. Prahlad Maharaj has also explained that a child's protectors, his parents, cannot save the child from the onslaught of birth and death, nor can medicine and a physician save one from death, nor can a boat or similar means of protection save a person drowning in the water, for everything is controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, suffering humanity must surrender to Krishna, as Krishna himself demands in the last instruction of Bhagavad Gita 1866. Sarvatanman paradyaja mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarvapapebhyo mokshayashami ma shuchaha. quote, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful action. Do not fear. All of human society must take advantage of this offer and thus be saved by Krishna from the danger of being crushed by the wheel of time, the wheel of past, present, and future. The word nishpidyamanam, being crushed, is very significant. Every living entity in the material condition is actually being crushed again and again. And to be saved from this position, one must take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then one will be happy. The word prapannam is also very significant. That means surrender, being surrendered. For unless one fully surrenders to the Supreme Lord, one cannot be saved from being crushed. A criminal is put in prison and punished by the government, but the same government, if it likes, can release the criminal from imprisoned life. Similarly, we must know conclusively that our material condition of suffering has been allotted to us by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and if we want to be saved from this suffering, we must appeal to the same controller. Thus one can be saved from this material condition. All right, heavy. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, which means I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. So, the context of this verse is that Prahlad is building his case for his surrender. Like, what need does he have to be a devotee? Why not try to carve out a way in the universe himself? And in the last few verses, in so many ways, he's pointing out that that doesn't make any sense and it won't work. And Prabhupada refers to one of them in passing here. He points out that although we have a responsibility to act in relationship to our roles in the world, even in doing so, there's no guarantee of a result or the result that we're looking for. A parent has to try to protect their children. Can they protect them all the time? No. Do they have to keep trying? Yes. And that's the irony, is that you have responsibilities to do, but you're not completely in charge. You're not completely in control. That doesn't mean neglect everything. It means recognize who's actually in control. A boat can't save everybody from drowning. Medicine can't save everybody who takes the medicine. You still have to take your medicine. But, as I pointed out when we read that verse, in the Ayurvedic texts, the medicinal biological texts of the Vedas, it says when you're taking your medicine, you should aushadhi chintayat Vishnum, you should remember source, because that's the potent ingredient in within or behind whatever potent medicinal ingredient. You read your labels on your vitamins and medicinal ingredient, vitamin C, vitamin D, non-medicinal ingredient, sugar, whatever else. But the medicinal ingredient behind the medicinal ingredient is Krishna's energy. He's allowing it to be the case that this thing can function in a certain way, and you hope that it works. And so Prahlad is talking about an internal orientation or reorientation away from independently trying to function in the material world as if I can control everything, and towards acting responsibly, but recognizing that results are not up to me. And it's not that nobody's in control. After we relinquish control, we may think, well, okay, so nobody's in control. No, there's a supreme controller. And Prahlad is convinced of this. He knows this fully. He's built up the case of who the controller is. In the previous verse, he said, just by your external energy, you have created these subtle bodies, the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego of the living entity, that keep us, attracted to certain things and averse from other things. I like this and I don't like that, right? I like the smell of baked bread. I don't like the smell of balsamic vinegar. Did I choose that? No, I didn't. I am born into a body, gross and subtle. Gross means this stuff you can see. And subtle means the inclinations, the trajectory. I'm born into that. I have some karma. And Prahlad is saying, we may not be in control of that, but Krishna is. It's actually his external energy. He has very deep, very precise understanding of how everything is related to everything else in the world and what its origin is. And he's explaining that in these prayers. And he's pointing out that, well, because of that, I'm actually in this condition of what he calls poetically nishpidyamanam, being crushed. Why? Because he's talking about a wheel, chakre, the wheel of time. This is a very common description of the nature of the material world. So one of the interesting ways in which the Vedic context or Vedic perspective differs from the modern context is that time is cyclical. It's not linear. It's not that it has a beginning and an end, and everything is moving in one way. It, just like we see in a year, there's seasons. In a body, there's seasons. And everything is going like this, right? And you can either go upwards or you can go downwards, but there's always cycles. And so the nature of one who's existing in the material world is that they're being moved according to cycles. This is called a chakra. It's called a wheel, literally. The wheel of time is a very, very common visual analogy and functional analogy, because wheels move in that way, and they also crush, they turn, right? Mm-hmm. And so Prahlad is saying, this wheel of time is actually rolling over me again and again. He's saying that I don't want to exist unconsciously. I don't want to go with the flow, because it's merely just being pushed around by this machine of material nature. It's like, wake up, do the thing I gotta do, like eat, take care of the body, brush my teeth, and then I gotta go, like, I remember I heard at a class one time, somebody was, a devotee of Krishna was driving on the road, and he saw a very amusing license plate. It said, I owe, O-W-E, I owe, so off to work I go. Right? Like, why do they have to work? Because they have a debt. Mm. Everyone has a debt in this world. You have a debt to your parents. You have a debt to the society that educated you. You have a debt to the demigods that are providing air and water. You have a debt. You have some momentum. You have a debt. You've got some own personal trajectory. I like this. I like that. I got to make it happen for me. Got to make my goals come true. You have this momentum. And if we function in an unconscious way, you can live an entire life like that. Just pushed from one thing to another, like a drunk stumbling from one experience to another, not knowing the context. Just surprised and pushed and pulled. And yeah, and that's life. So, I guess it's time to die now. And it's just living, dying, birth, death, old age, disease, coming and going, kids, growing up, losing, gaining, winning. I'm a villain, I'm a hero, all that stuff. You can have that whole experience. And it's quite external. And Prahlad is saying, from his vantage point, in a very conscious way, recognizing that that's just the externals of life, I don't want that. I don't want to simply become crushed by that wheel that's going up and down. Therefore, I'm surrendering to you. Because I recognize that you're facilitating that situation. And it's not that you're like keeping the world under your thumb out of some kind of punitive sense. We're bad, we've sinned, therefore we have to suffer. No, it's like he's facilitating that. Anybody can have that. And in fact, we kind of have to some degree. We have a dual existence. Even if we're very spiritually oriented, we have to wake up, empty our bladder, water out and water in, clean the body, all these things. But, we may not be so identifying with that so much. We may have an idea that we want to actually have something deeper. And he can facilitate that. And that's the point, is that he doesn't do that unless one wants it, right? Because that's the nature of relationship. Nobody can say, like, I shall make them love me, right? It doesn't work that way. The ability of the living entity to actually see and relate to the person behind all of this is their right. It's their birthright. Just by taking birth, no matter what your karma is, no matter what your likes or dislikes are, no matter what good or bad happens to you in your life, you can always, at any time, sign a little slip, opt out. I don't want to just do that. I may have to do some of that still, but I don't want to just do that. I want to also see you. I want to see what's going on. I want to understand my position. I want to understand the person. You can have that. But that has to be voluntarily entered into. Otherwise, it's a kind of exploitation. You can't force yourself on anybody. It just becomes a kind of assault, right? So Krishna is not like that. Krishna doesn't force himself on anybody. Although he's all-powerful, he's omniscient, he's everywhere, he's providing all the ingredients for our facilitated material experience. He's like, as soon as you want me in here, until then, I'm back here, behind the curtain. You don't have to deal with it. Because if we don't want it, it's very annoying. Like when your parents interfere with your play as a child, it's very annoying. It's like, I'm playing Legos here, Mom. I'm playing with my friends. I don't want, until I say I want lemonade, don't come in, right? We want to have our little experience, right?
And it's like, we don't want to be reminded that the Legos and the lemonade and the little playground we have is provided for us. We want to play. We want to be immersed. Until that time, we're like, oh, I stubbed my toe, Mom, Then it's like, okay, then they're there. They're there immediately. No gap. So that's Krishna. Krishna's like, okay, I don't need it. I'm not needy. I'm not a people pleaser. I'm not going to cajole you, beg you. I'm not going to exploit you, rape you. I'm not going to make you mine. As soon as you want me, I'm here. And there's a beauty to that. There's a reciprocation in that. And so Prahlad is saying, I'm surrendering, which means I want this. I choose you. I'm making my choice. And he's very convinced, as we see in these prayers. He's very convinced. He's very convinced because he knows the alternative doesn't really go anywhere. And if you look at the next verse, he says something really powerful. I mentioned how his father was so, not just vicious, but extremely powerful. He was so expert at fulfilling his own material desires that he created a situation where he was essentially a tyrant. Effectively, the most successful tyrant that the world has ever seen. He was really, really good at getting his own way, to the point that even demigods had to bow down to him. So Prahlad says in the next verse, my dear Lord, people in general want to be elevated to the higher planets. They want to go to some heavenly system for a long duration of life, opulence, enjoyment, etc., etc. But I've seen all those through the activities of my father. When my father was angry and he laughed sarcastically at the demigods, they were immediately vanquished simply by seeing the movements of his eyebrows. He reached such a position of prestige and power and personal effectiveness, that he could control even the controllers of material nature. Yet my father, who is so powerful, has now been vanquished by you within a moment. His father refused to recognize his own position as a dependent living entity. He tried to become God, tried to occupy that position. The only difference between him and any other person in that modality is that he was more successful than anybody. But Prahlad saying he was the most successful and still he failed. Why would I want to play that game? Why would I want to push my chips into that pile? I don't want that. I'm surrendering to you. I want to know you. I want that privilege of the experience that's behind this wheel, like crushing and turning. I want that presence in my life. I want that relationship. I want to see you. I want to know who I am. I want to know who you are. I want to relate in that way. And there's a kind of freedom in that's not available anywhere else. It's not available in the coming and going. It's not available in the winning and losing of the material world. It's not a free exchange, actually. Nothing in the material world is a free exchange. It's always based on something, right? There's always some context. Even the things that are like the most pure, like a parent's love, there's always some well, yeah, but until you disobey me, or until you disrespect me, or until I run out of patience. There's always some context. Like, people try their best, but it's never completely free. The free exchange of love is available at the spiritual platform. And that's something that can only be approached when we approach the source of the spiritual platform, right? So we have to really try to do that, so that ultimately even our relationships in the material world can be on the level of the soul, and not like, what have you done for me lately? Which is the unfortunate and, it's not politically correct, but, painful reality of material relationships, material life, is that it's ultimately dissatisfying. It feels like a game. It feels manipulative. Or it's dependent on some external context, dependent on time, on mood, on season, on the health of my body, on my money and my food and my beauty or whatever. It's just, it doesn't work. So Prahlad, he sees through all that. And he recognizes that behind all of that, there's the capacity for the pure form of relationship, right? There's a platonic ideal. And he knows that the experience of that isn't some mental construction or some manipulation of ideas. It's actually like a simple, heartfelt experience of surrendering to Source. And that's what he's doing here, face to face, because he had that opportunity to pray to Nrsingadev. Behind that apparently very vicious, very powerful, very angry form of half lion, half man, he saw, no, this is my own Lord, my own sweet Lord, who's appeared in this way just to protect me. He saw what the other devotees there, the demigods, couldn't see, that this isn't about power and control and viciousness. Even his own aggression to my father was another form of mercy. He liberated him. Everything he does is love. He sees that because he's already a great devotee. And he's showing that to us by his conviction that there's this loving relationship and opportunity behind all the comings and goings. That's what I want. I don't want any more games. Hare Krishna. So those are some thoughts. Hearing about the nature of the material world compared to a wheel that actually can crush just by the motion, the inexorable. You know, if you think about like factories, you don't want to get caught in those things, right? You have like some loose cloth, you get dragged into a machine. That's the material world. Like, don't play with that energy. Don't like be like, yeah, you know, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It's like you got to play in the world to some extent, but don't invest your heart in that, because it just goes and goes. The next thing you know, you look up, you're like, wow, decades have passed, and here I am, and I haven't invested in myself. So we talked about that, and we talked about the person behind that, the loving opportunity that's there, and how it's not a fear-based offer. It's actually very much a freedom-based, loving-based offer, to have a free exchange of love and affection and attention, which is in its pure form not really available in material relationships, and is the pure relationship that can actually allow us to live in this world according to that spiritual foundation we have, instead of the very conditional relational foundations, which don't satisfy. So now we'll take any reflections. Reflection means anything you heard.
I really liked how you said just now, like, sort of like unconditional relationship isn't available in this material world. Like, it's something that I think I've struggled with throughout my entire life, of like, you know, growing up Catholic and having this sort of, you know, what is love, and defining, and these conditions that get placed upon it, whether or not you realize that you have them with people in your life, and how your connection with God, or your connection with Krishna, is truly the only thing that is unconditional. And I think that that's something that I really appreciate about this particular verse, of bringing that again forward, and thinking about, you know, even the japa meditation made me think of like this sort of frailty of like these relationships that we have in the material world are frail. They have conditions, and that's something that I think is like, also reminds me of something that, you know, is in the Bible. Jesus said, oh, you know, the Garden of Gethsemane, the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak. And our you know, thinking about that in my job, of like, oh yeah, as I spoke last morning program, I'm not a morning person, but I'm changing that, and I'm challenging that, because my spirit is willing, and my spirit craves that, which is also like what we talked about in this verse, of like that sort of like, Prahlad has this understanding of, and this inherent knowing that I think is so, it's such a great reminder in the sort of material world, when you get caught in that wheel, and you can remind yourself that you're in a wheel, but you're not of the wheel. Yeah.
Be in the world, but not of the world. Also from the Bible. Very, very practical. Yeah, and we see Prahlad had his relationships in the world. He was in school. He had his relationship with his father, but he dealt with everybody. The experience of dealing with people when you're on the spiritual platform is different. You know, he saw them as a soul, and he still functioned like, he wasn't like a crazy person or a wild person, like wandering naked. He was very much in the world, but he didn't identify it as that. He was just like, when his father asked him at one point, because his father enrolled him in school, and the school was effectively an indoctrination program designed for him to have his children, and also the children of all the other wealthy elite, to be indoctrinated into becoming the future rulers. And so the teachers were teaching like materialistic things, and how to get your way, and how to like might makes right, those kinds of ideas, very ego driven. And so his father was very happy to see that his son is in school, and like a proud father, he says, okay, please tell me, what is the best thing you've learned? So Prahlad sits on his lap. In fact, the picture is here. He sits on his lap, and his father is quite angry at this point, because Prahlad has answered the question, the best thing I've learned. And he starts talking about what he learned in the womb. The best thing I've learned is that the greatest joy is to engage my senses in the service of the Supreme. And his father's like, what? Pushes him off his lap because he's just horrified. But the point is, Prahlad, like, he loves his father, and he's dealing with those relationships on the spiritual level. So we can be in the world. We don't have to like run away into the countryside, the mountaintop, live under the ocean or whatever. But there's a beauty in being fixed in that relationship. And anyway, that's what I was reminded of when you said that.
Yeah, and I think like that Prahlad is just one of the great reminders of how we can exist in the material world while also pursuing Krishna. I think that that's something that the whole duality is always a challenge for me, and to have great examples like Prahlad.
Yeah, he's an old-timer.
Yeah, I was struck by one of the first things you said in describing the verse was Prahlad is building his case for surrender. Mm-hmm. So he's like explaining to everyone why he needs to surrender. And I was, our japa affirmation was around chanting with humility and then also living with humility. And we were given examples of how to live with humility. And I was thinking about how unconsciously most of us in the material world are building our case for why we don't need to surrender.
Yeah.
Like, I got this. I have this figured out. I'm strong. I'm tough. I got it. Yeah. And Prahlad is giving us, is living in his example and also teaching us, right, that why we need to surrender. And it's really essential for me to be reminded of that and to hear that over and over and over and over and over again. Because even hearing it, understanding it doesn't mean that I'm always living from that place.
Yeah.
Right? And catching myself when I am thinking I'm the doer, right? And I am the controller, and that being locked in ego versus in truth.
Yeah, I've always loved that. One of the great aspects of these books is that the idea of surrender and heartfelt connection it's so convincing, because one is not just told like this is what you should do, like rule-based, right and wrong, right, or like fear-based or whatever. It's like, here's a bunch of reasons why it makes sense, and if you don't believe it, try applying the logic in your life, right? If you don't believe that you're actually fundamentally not able to affect your own will, then try like living your life as if you are and see how you fail, and recognize that I have frailty. Like there's a certain logic in that. There's a certain experiment you can run in your life. And Prahlad, he's talking about so many things that are very practical, and from so many angles, he's building a case. Like a good lawyer has to build a case. No judge is gonna reach a conclusion with a strong case. And so, as somebody who spends a lot of time up here, I find it so refreshing that doubts and the intelligence are honored, very, very clearly honored. Because Prahlad is not like, he's no sentimental fool. He's brilliant. He's actually a brilliant person. He's so wise. And the case is so convincing. It's like, oh yeah, every time I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah, what am I doing? Of course, this is such a great idea. I feel so great. Chanting Hare Krishna, reading the Bhagavatam, being with devotees, like living my life as a servant, like orienting my life that way. I'm reconvinced. And, so yeah, there's a real depth, a real kind of gravitas to that case that's built, and it's not like fleeting and flimsy. It's like, oh, whimsically, yeah, maybe I'll try that. That's not bad. Not bad to have a kind of fly-by-night operation, try your bhakti out, but to stick the course, you have to have some grounding, some heaviness, some depth, right, and that's really there. It's great.
Right, and that like, I'm frail. I need help. These things that we also heard in the morning, the affirmation, right? Is like, and we're taught that those are bad things, that you're lacking, or that there's something wrong with you, or whatever it is, if you can't succeed. But what we're hearing here is from the spiritual context of like, that's the case for everyone, whether you're the president of the United States or you're unhoused, right? It's like, it's the case for every single one of us until we can get out of our arrogance and our ego to admit that it doesn't mean I'm not capable. It doesn't mean I don't also have strength and all of these things that Krishna's empowered me with, right? But I, on my own, without that empowerment, right, then I'm lost.
Right. may be so powerful, but who created the muscle? Maybe so
Right.
intelligent, who created the brain? We're functioning with so much support, and there's a sweetness in that. Sometimes people think like you can only come to that place of surrender through like bitter defeat, and you may. That's not the end of the world. You may do that, and that's one path. But we see that the experience of like very advanced, very wise, realized devotees is one of sweetness. It's not one of bitterness. Quite the opposite. They're actually so satisfied in that surrender. It's not like, oh God, I lost. Okay, throw up the white flag. The world's a mess. I give up. It's like that may be a beginning point to surrender. It's not where it ends, thankfully.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. More reflections? Tanya.
Yeah, the analogy of the wheel is just so powerful, and I think most of us, at least from my experience, you just follow the path that life, you start just following the path, like you just do what your parents did or what you were conditioned to do, and so many people that I've talked to, have just, awakened at some point saying, wait, why am I doing this? Like, what was the purpose here? Like, because you're just on the wheel, you're just doing the thing. And, it's so important to understand that we have a choice and that we have agency. And there's been some really poignant moments, throughout my life where, I didn't realize I had a choice until I did. Right. I remember a girlfriend when I was in my previous marriage, terrible. She said to me, she sat down with me, she said, if you're miserable, you are allowed to change that. You're allowed to get a divorce. You're allowed to move on, And until I heard those words come out of her mouth, I thought, oh, well, this is the path I'm on. I have to stick with it, that kind of thing. And, it's interesting. I also heard a quote. I've heard a quote over the years, design a life for yourself that you don't feel like you have to escape from. Right. And I've heard the phrase, you're the CEO of your life. Well, actually, now I don't really think that I'm the CEO of my life. I might be the COO of my life. I might be the chief operating officer, but Krishna's the chief executive officer and always has been. But the fact that, we can stop and say, okay, wait a minute, I can choose to get off this wheel and do it a different way, is so liberating. And like, I'm sitting in Florida, like the relocation, I'm curating a life that I want for myself in a different way. But honestly, Krishna's the one that's affording all these opportunities and throwing this in my lap and helping. So it's just, I love the whole analogy of the wheel and the fact that we have agency to choose, and to choose surrender actually makes everything easier.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And the practicality of surrender is that, with Krishna as the CEO, then if it's like, okay, I want to surrender, then you don't have to figure out. You can get some guidance from devotees, but you don't have to figure out like all the nitty gritty. It's like, well, what do I do? Well, try chanting, try waking up and front loading your day with some chanting and some reading, spiritual philosophy. Get together with devotees. Like, we may not choose that on our own. I wouldn't, but it's just a great idea and it works. And you run that experiment and you're like, oh wow, yeah, that's helping me. That's actually opening up a side of myself that I couldn't open on my own. I may want to open it. I may be part of that relationship, but I couldn't independently make it happen. So we can be the COO. We can affect that. It's like, yeah, okay, Krishna, you're the boss, and try it out. And just doing it in manageable chunks is what bhakti is all about. Makes it work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
As somebody who has, I'll either call it like autopiloted through a lot of life or sleptwalk through a lot of life. I've tried to like look at, 45 years before, Krishna consciousness and like what shifted, what happened, what were one of the things. And I think, when you think about Krishna and doing what pleases him, like not like being also raised Catholic, like, you're always taught to like be like, please help me pass my test and please help me do this and please help me do this. And when you shift that to not asking for so much and then being disappointed that you don't get it, where it's like, help me do things that please you. It's such a different way to like show up in the world. And there was another story I heard. There was a female disciple of Prabhupada who was doing RT, and at one point in time she turned around and like Prabhupada was standing there, and she was like, oh my gosh, if I knew he was standing there, I would have done this, or I maybe would have done this better, or I would have been more, you know. And I think about that too, that like, you know, not only, you know, is my guru always with me, but like Krishna's always with me. So am I acting in a way where I would be proud of, in a good way, of what I'm doing with like Prabhupada standing behind me, or would I be proud of what I'm doing with my guru standing behind me? And so I feel like, you know, when you have purpose and when you're doing something to please, you know, the ultimate giver of love, you show up differently, and it's not just an autopilot, it's like intentional. And I'm screwing it up all the time. Like I'll be like chanting and I'm doing terrible chanting, and it's just like, oh, okay, wait, this is not pleasing you. Like you wouldn't appreciate it if I'm like, you're talking to me and I'm scrolling on my phone. So yeah, I find it's like that little shift of like intention for me was something that helped wake me out of like the numbing and the autopilot and all the things that I was doing.
Yeah. And the more that we practice, you end up finding that the things that please Krishna are actually really pleasing to us too. Like distraction's a kind of hell.
Yeah.
It's actually really enervating. It's not good for the mind.
Yeah.
To live constantly in distraction, to have no attention span, to not be able to be present, to focus is actually really terrible. And we glorify in our society. We're like super good at getting distracted, but the ability to be like, no, I'm doing this and not something else is actually a superpower. You know, if somebody thinks that they're in charge, just ask them to do one thing for a couple of seconds, like get down to the nitty gritty, get their mind onto something for a couple of seconds. It's really hard. The Yoga Sutras explain to even focus the mind for a couple of seconds, what to speak of, you know, longer stretches of time. But when you do it, it's so sweet. You know, just being present with anything is sweet. So like, okay, presence is part of Krishna's culture. Being like choosing one thing and being present is actually like really nice. And I may not have chosen that. I may have chosen like a life of distraction, or had it chosen for me. But if I try it out and I start to feel like after a while, this is amazing. This is a revolutionary idea. We're generally not asked to do things that are very pleasing to Krishna, but are displeasing to us. It's actually quite functional, very much effective living strategies. Thank you. We had a comment in chat. From Leanne. Scroll down. Okay. I love to hear about Prahlad because he shows me how devoted he is to bhakti and steady to what his heart is saying without fear or second guessing himself. Thank you for class this morning. I know. What a brave soul, right? 5 years old. What's the social standing of a child? You can't even choose what to eat, when to go to sleep. Like go in this room, go in that room. You're like you're the like peon. You have no power. But he's the most powerful person in the room, and he's completely self-assured because of his relationship. What a revolutionary thing. Yeah, he's fearless, doesn't second-guess himself. That's really a function of his conviction on the spiritual platform. We see this in so many ways, like the 10th canto, who are the most elevated devotees? The gopis. Young girls. What kind of power do like 14-year-old girls have in society? Not much. You know, but they happen to be the most realized devotees, so they're like glorified, and they're completely fearless, although they have no social standing practically. So bhakti is ultimately like the best way to become fearless. The only way to become fearless in a lasting way is you're not basing your power on some transient material construct or resource. Thanks for that.
Well, that just also shows how accessible bhakti is. Like, you don't have to be wise in your years to experience that. And I think that that's something, like, I remember, like, being a child and being so enamored with my spirituality and with my relationship with God at the time, and thinking about, okay, well, what am I doing now? How can I recapture that, even if it looks a little different? And, like, for me, knowing that, like, I had that once, and I'm capable of that, and Krishna enables me to do that, even if it feels harder now or different. And it's, you know, to hear these stories and be like, oh, this 5-year-old is like, wow, like how brilliant. And you know, just to have that, you know, I think we lose that sense of wonder as we age, and this sense of like acceptance. And
Yeah.
I think that's something too. It's like remembering these stories from these sweet children, and you know, it's something that like I think in my practice is like where I can bring that forward to Krishna, because he's speaking to me at all ages.
Yeah.
And so how can I meet him at that?
Yeah, we generally, as we get older, we limit ourselves more and more and more. The vision gets narrow, the doors get closed, the windows get closed. You know, we become convinced we know what's up and what's possible, what's not possible. And like, here's a 5-year-old who's acting as a spiritual master of an assembly of demigods, completely fearless. It's like, did anybody guess that? You know, so if Krishna can make it happen for him, can make it happen for the gopis. What is my situation that I'm so special that I can say, yeah, no, but I can't be helped. Like, Krishna can help them, but he can't help me. Like, no, he can help. He's got it. It's totally within his capacity. It's very liberating. All right. Any more reflections, comments, questions? All right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Shri Prahlad Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
Now let's take this opportunity to offer our respectful obeisances unto all of the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, who are just like desire trees. They can fulfill the desires of everyone and are full of compassion for all the fallen conditioned souls. Jai. Vancha kalpatarupshashcha kripasatupya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Jai.
Yeah, devotees like Prahlad.